Good afternoon and welcome to this special Korea Society program, part of our Korean War at 70 series. And we thank you for joining us today, all of those of you who are listening via podcast or watching live via YouTube. This is a special Zoom YouTube session, and it is the third in our series on the Korean War at 70, our first being with Columbia University, our second with Hana Kim, formerly of Charlie Rangel's office. And today we have Sal Scarlato. Sal is the chapter president for Central Long Island of the Korean War Veterans and also the area commander. And we're honored to have him here. Sal has been a great friend. I've known him and worked with him now for a decade, and we're very grateful that he took the time to join us today for Veteran Tales. Part of the idea of our series is that we have had some discussion of legal issues, of international relations issues, with Hana Kim and Jonathan Corrado, of visits to war memorials around the world. And now with Sal Scarlato, something that brings it home, memories of the war. And in knowing Sal for a decade, I have to say that he's not a person who really talks about himself, nor do many of the veterans from that generation. I think they've made a firm commitment to very much talk about the heroics, the service, the valor, and the sacrifice of one another. But today I've asked Sal to make an exception and to really talk about his experience and to personify what happened 70 years ago for us, so that those of us in the policy community, those of us who are educators, can have a better sense of what that experience was like. So Sal, welcome. Terrific to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's a great honor and a privilege for you to have me do this special event live. I have done these before, but this one happens to be the most greatest one because it's a lot more people that are going to view it. So I thank you. I thank the Korean Society. I thank Tom. I thank your ambassador. I thank Jonathan, Peter. There's always so many people that when you do these events that go beyond the call of duty.
Indeed, Sal, thank you. And thank you to your daughter, Karen, for helping today. Thank you for the memory of your late wife, who has was such a strong contributor. I always remember her for her wonderful time, especially during the holiday events. And she's with us very much in thought and prayer. And to John Ha and your guys there, they've been just wonderful supporters of the Korea Society. We're delighted to have you and them every year for our gala, as well as for our July 27th Armistice Day events. Let's get really to you. Thanks for your service. And if you'll take us back 70 years, how you enlisted, how you served in the Navy Reserves, and then how you arrived as a Marine in Korea.
Well, when I was 18 years old, actually when I was 16, I joined the Naval Air Reserve. And the reason I joined is because I had an older brother in World War II really tried to protect me from going to Korea. He had the foresight, and he used to read the papers a lot. Well, in around June and July of 1951, we had a social club. And we had a couple of fellows that were older than us who were killed in Korea, okay, brutally. So we all decided, most of the guys decided to upgrade their draft, and we enlisted in the Marine Corps. Now, my problem was I was in the Naval Air Reserve, and I had to get released from the Navy before I go in the Marines. So we decided, it was 17 of us, and we went increments of 3 to join the Marine Corps. So me and 2 other fellows, my 2 best friends, went down in October. The exact date was October 15th, and we joined the Corps. So I had to go to Floyd Bennett Field, that was where my squadron was, to get a letter of release because I could not get a discharge. So the commanding officer's name was Lieutenant Commander Copshaw. His first remark was, "Are you crazy?" do you want to die like a pig? Well, as an 18-year-old boy, you know that it usually goes in one ear and out the other. So anyway, make a long story short, he gave me the release, and I went into the Marine Corps. So I did my 12 weeks of boot camp. And actually, the first time I went boot camp, I hated the Marines because they were really, really tough. And you know, when you come from Brooklyn, in my era, we had a lot of gangs. So it was very hard to accept orders the way they were given. But you adapt to it. And so I did my 12 weeks in boot camp. First, I never thought I would live that day. But when I graduation, while I was in boot camp, I got my release from the Navy, my discharge. And so that was official that I was in the United States Marine Corps. So my tour was when the honor of being a Marine is when the DI and the officers put the eagle, anchor, and globe on you. They give you 3. They put 1 on your cap and 2 on your lapels. Not they don't put it on, they hand it to you in your hands. And believe me, your chest goes way, way out. I mean, you're a Marine now, and you went through a lot of training. So I did my 10 days leave. So anybody that went back to Paris Island know that we're going to Korea. It didn't penetrate at the time. And it was Christmas week that I came home. And on Christmas Eve, I just have to tell you this about my lovely wife, is how fate becomes so ideal. I was home with my parents. We had dinner. And I said, I'm going to go to Brooklyn. We lived in Queens at the time. I said, I'm going to go to Brooklyn to see my grandmother and grandfather. And then I'll come home because the next day I had to get on a bus, go back to Paris Island. So I went to see my grandparents. And instead of going home, we hung out about 2 blocks from where they lived. And I went to what we call the State Theater. Now, I had no business going to the State Theater, but I decided to go. There was a few friends of mine. And my lovely wife, she was there with her 2 cousins and a friend. So we had chatted and we walked. I says, can I walk you to your aunt's house? She says, it's fine. So I walked her to her aunt's house. And at that particular time, we went on the side to talk, and I asked her to be my girlfriend. And she told me I should be honored. So we got married in 57, and we were married 61 years when she passed away.
Mm.
That's how
Yeah.
I believe in fate and a guardian angel. So when I got back to my unit, we went to California with the 1st Marine Division. We did 12 weeks of combat infantry training. Okay. So we boarded one morning and we were in the Long Beach area about 3:30 in the morning. They decided to put us on ships. I went over on the Weagle, and there was 4,500 Marines. So at this time, it still didn't penetrate the reason I was going to Korea and my duties to perform as a Marine. You know, you're 18 and a half years old, you're still a little cocky. You know, you don't realize what the reality of war is. So anyway, we got on the ship. We spent 14 days and we hit Kobe, Japan. So when we hit Kobe, Japan, naturally being wild kids, you're wild. You get there and you embarrass yourself by treating the Japanese not with respect, but with dishonor, which we were wrong. But like I said, we were not smart enough to realize that they fought what they believe in and we fought what we believed in. Well, anyway, we spent 2 days there. They put us back on the ship. And we had, I think, 2 days to get to Korea. On the first day, they told us to load our belts with ammo and take 2 bandoliers. Okay? So the evening of, I think it was the April 10th or April 9th, something in that area, was around 4:30, 4:45 in the evening, because the tides in Korea were very bad. So they had to go late at night or dusk. So we went down a ladder on the ship. We down a rope ladder into the landing barge. And as we approached Incheon area, actually, well, we were going to Busan, and we were diverted our ship to go to Incheon because at that time the Marines were on the eastern front of Korea, called the Punch Bowl. So Panmunjom, the peace talks were going on, and they were in Munsanin. So now they moved them to Panmunjom. So when I moved to Panmunjom, they wanted the Marines to be the back door. So on the western front, they created what they called the Jamestown line, just above Panmunjom area. So they moved the whole 1st Marine Division over to the west coast. So we went on landing barges and you cycled. I don't know how long we cycled. It felt like eternity. You're going back and forth, zigzagging. So anyhow, we got in the area, and just before we got to the place we got to depart, the officer says, land at departure, lock and load. Now that means you take your ammo and put it in your weapon, you cock your weapon and lock it, and you still don't realize that where you're going. You know, you still think it's not the reality of the war yet. So anyway, we took the ladders. We went where the rocks were. Some guys went where the beach area was, and we got onto the beach area, and very light resistance, very, very light resistance, mostly a little guerrilla action. And they put us on trucks, and we went to an area called Ashcom City. Now, this is not on a map. It's not a town in Korea. It's called American Army Company something supply. And it was right in Incheon and near the railroad station. So we were there for about 2 days, and they decided to, but in the meantime, when I was in California, I kept asking my platoon sergeant, why are we going to Korea? What purpose do we have in Korea? And the remark I got was, when you get to Korea, you're gonna know. I must have said this several times to my platoon leader, my squad leader at different times. And in Korea, I said, what are we doing here? What purpose do we have? We're Americans and they're Koreans. So each one said the same thing to me, that when you get there, you'll get the knowledge why you're going to be there. So that on the 3rd day, they put us on trucks, and we started up to the MLR at around 5:30, 6 o'clock. Everything was done mostly at between 3 and 6. And on the way up, we got hit with small arm fire and some mortars. So we jumped out of the trucks and we head for the first cover we had, and it was a rice paddy. Now, the rice paddy, the fertilizer they use is not the same fertilizer that we use. It's really human fertilizer. And I dove into this rice paddy face on. And when I dove into this rice paddy, I remember what this lieutenant commander told me. You want to die like a pig. And I was full of, and it started to rain. And I didn't fire my weapon yet. I was scared. I was so scared. I was crying. My squad leader hit me in the helmet and says, you better stop firing your weapon, which I did. I don't know what I hit. I didn't know what it was. Matter of fact, I thought I got wounded because I was so soaking wet. Because, rice paddy has a lot of water in it. So they put us back on trucks. So when we went back on the trucks, we were kind of smelly toward them, because of the fertilizer they used. And we hit the MLR where our unit was. And we got out of the trucks, and three of us, we went to this one bunker, and the gentleman, the Marines that were in that bunker says, you ain't coming in here. You guys kind of smell a little bit. Stay outside and get washed off. And we stood outside, washed off. It was raining, dark, couldn't see anything. And we were there a couple of days. They assigned us to a platoon. I was the first platoon, first squad, first fire team. And the platoon sergeant came over to me and says, you look like a good, strong, healthy guy and small. So I didn't know what he meant, and he handed me a BAR. He says, give your weapon to the corporal. And he gave me the BAR belt. He gave me the BAR. And the BAR belt was 15 pounds. The BAR itself was 20 pounds. And I was only 140 pounds. So, the arithmetic didn't add up too much, me carrying this weapon, but that was the weapon I was assigned to. So we were there a few days, and then we had outpost duty. When you, in bunkers or in a reverse slope, we had two slopes. We had one EMLR, main line of resistance, and behind us was what they call the reverse slope, in case the Chinese came around and tried to surround you. So we were assigned to outpost 1. That was way up on the tip. So it took you approximately maybe 20 minutes. It took us a little over about 3/4 of an hour because it rained the night before and it was all muddy. It was kind of difficult climbing up this hill to get into our position. So we were there about maybe a half a day, or that evening, the guys were telling me, be careful, you're going to hear some music. I said, what music? So I heard, first you hear the bugle, then you hear the horn, and then you hear the whistle. And that's when the Chinese charged. That was their method. They charge up the hill and so forth and so on. Even there, I froze on my weapon. I had so much water in my eyes, I couldn't even see. And again, there was a fellow right next to me on my right side. He was going home in 1 week. He was going home. I didn't even get to know him that well. His name was Fred. And he got hit in the belly. And again, the corporal hit me in the helmet, stopped firing my weapon. But when he got hit, he landed on me. And I had a lot of his blood on me. So when the corpsman came, he thought I got hit. So he get my hand, he says, put your hand on his stomach. He got a belly wound, until he wrapped the bandage and put the sulfur in him. and I had his liver in my hand. That was the first time I came in contact with any kind of disaster. But the poor guy died. Unfortunately, he never made it home alive. He had 1 week to live to go home. Well, that night we had about an 8-hour or 7-hour battle. And I must have fired over 300 rounds. I just kept firing, knocking my clip magazine, firing. It was just a disaster. And then I realized that this is a war. This is not a police action. This is a real war. People are going to get hurt and killed. And I was crying a lot. And I started to pray. And I prayed to every God that you could imagine. And I always believed in guardian angels. I prayed to the guardian angel for me to survive and get out of this situation. So I had a motto: a boy that went to Korea in 7 days became a man. Just like Jesus rose, I became a man. I became a man. And I was very, very bitter. I was really bitter at this point. And to make things worse, there was a lot of other incidents that happened, but I'm going to try and be a little brief to the story of a certain special story. Well, anyhow, we were on an area where the Imjam River was. This is another story. And the 1st Marine Regiment got hit pretty bad on this hill called Siberia. And we were approximately about 4 or 5 miles, not far from there. So they needed some help cleaning out the bunkers, reinforce. So my squad, actually the outfit I was in was Baker Company, 1st Shore Party Battalion. We were an amphibious unit, but there was no amphibious in Korea, so they made us combat engineers. And so my squad was sent over to this area where the 1st Marine Division, 1st Marine Regiment, one of the companies got hit very, very bad. So we were over there to clean out bunkers, reinforce the trenches, and whatever duties we had. So we were there about 2 days, and from the corner of my eye, well, actually we heard the horn, then the bugle, then the whistle, and we got an attack by the Chinese CCF, Chinese Communist Forces. And from the corner of my right eye, I see this guy throw something, and I got hit with a grenade. So I rolled down the hill. There was 3 of us that got hit. 1 didn't make it, 2 of us got wounded. And when I rolled down the hill, when I opened my eyes, I saw these 2 Koreans, well, Asian people. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be captured. But they were Koreans, South Koreans, called the Korean Service Unit Group. This group used to help us with ammo, bringing wounded down, bodies. So the corpsman came over to me and he asked if I needed morphine. I said, my right leg blew up. I had shrapnel in my neck and shrapnel in my right hand. They were little particles. So he did what he had to do. They put me on a medical jeep and they brought me to, I think it was Easy Company Medical. We didn't have a MASH unit. We had a service unit, okay? And they airlifted me by helicopter they flew me over. And just before that, the pilot came out and shook my hand, and the fellow next to me on the other side of the aircraft. And then we flew us to the hospital ship. It was a USS Constellation. Now, as we were flying there, I was in the twilight zone because they shot me up with a lot of morphine. He kept looking at me and smiling and put his hand thumbs up and then turned to the other gentleman and hands thumbs up. Well, anyhow, when we landed, he came out and he apologized for giving us a bumpy ride. I spent almost 4 weeks in a puddle of ice, and they put me back to normal. And I went back to my unit. So I was very, very bitter. I hated South Korea. I hated the whole war. I hated my officers. I hated the government. I hated everybody. I even hated my parents for making me born because I was in hell. And I said, this is ridiculous. Why am I here? I can't understand why I'm here. Well, I have to tell you this story. It's not pleasant. So one day we're on a patrol. This is a different time. There was a lot of incidents happen with my buddies getting killed or getting hurt. But this was the climax. There was a small little village. I don't know where we were. Small little village. And a lot of South Koreans were assassinated. They might have been in politics, I don't know. But on the side of the road, there were two women that were passed away, and 3 children, 2 little girls and a little boy. The 2 little girls were full of blood. They were not hurt. The little boy's hand was blown off. Well, I rushed over and I took my pouch, my medical pouch, and I wrapped his hand. This little boy grabbed my neck and was choking me. He was about 5, 6 years old, little kid. I took his hand and I put him in my pocket. I don't know why I did that, but I did it. So the corpsman came running over. He looked at it. He says, you got to hold him. He says, he's not bleeding a lot, but you got to hold him. He couldn't let him go. The little girls were fine. So one of the local villagers, with their sign language, mentioned that certain distance away, there was an orphanage. And they had a minister, but he was also a doctor. So we put the 2 girls and the little boy in a Jeep, okay, a medical Jeep, and we drove there. It was like eternity, but this driver was, I'm telling you, a hot rod. Well, we got there and we went inside, and the little boy would not let me go. Now, this doctor, I think it was Park, Kim, but there was an army captain there, a chaplain. I think his name was O'Brien or something. He was with the 2nd Army Division. And we finally got the little boy off my neck. And the 2 South Korean women and the doctor put him on the table, and he was, crying to no end. Well, we went back to the Jeep. And while in the Jeep, I said, well, wait a minute. I got the hand in my pocket. So I ran back in there, and the little boy died. It was too late. He couldn't survive. Well, now I knew why I was there. I finally got the answer that I've been questioning so many times. We were there to save these children. and these people for the brutality that they're going to have. So that made me a better Marine, a more Marine with a lot of understanding what the war was about. It was a disaster. It was horrible. It was not good at all. It was terrible.
Sal, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that tale, for your bravery, for your sacrifice. And as a brother of 5 Korean-born siblings, I appreciate even more with what you just said, what you and your comrades did to help Korea. If we could move to what it was like then, toward the end of the war, and what you felt around the armistice and about going home when you're ready.
Well, I went home around the end of March, beginning of April. My time was up, so I went home. The armistice was in July 27th. Now, when the armistice was signed, okay, well, when I got home, I had my 30-day leave, and then I was assigned to the 2nd Marine Division, same thing, Baker Company. And while I was there, I got a relapse on my wounds. So that ended my career. And I decided to stay in the Marine Corps then. I made up my mind, but it didn't work out. I wound up in the Naval Hospital for 5 months. So when I was in the Naval Hospital and the armistice was signed on July 27th, a corpsman, actually 2 corpsmen, came in with a jug of pure water, but it was 190 alcohol, and 2 things of orange juice and a loaf of bread. And it came in, they says, the war is over. Armistice was signed. Well, everybody yelled and screamed. We love it. I happened to be a bed patient at the time, and I had just taken some medication, okay? So the corpsman says, we all got to celebrate. Everybody was yelling, screaming, thank God, everybody's coming home. So they gave us a little cup, the little cups that they put the pills in. And I drank it like a dummy. And I got sick as a dog because the medication and the liquor didn't agree. They had to pump my stomach. And it wasn't too cheerful the day the armistice was signed for me. But it was so great that now we know that a lot of our buddies are going to come home and the war is over. And I made myself sort of dedicated, not right away, and about 20 years later, to the Korean people. I made up my mind that when I met my first Korean, if you don't mind, I'll tell you a little story on that, is we had a monument in Hop Park. Okay, in 1990, it was, so every Sunday, we used to see someone put a bouquet of roses on the, we had 2 monuments, a soldier and a map of Korea. And it was a bouquet of flowers. Now, I live approximately 4 or 5 miles. So I says, I gotta catch this guy. I don't know who it is. So one day, for some reason, I passed the area and I see this gentleman there. His name was Kuhu Park, the first South Korean I met after 30 years or 40 years, whatever it was. And we became very, very good friends. And the second South Korean I met, we formed an organization in '89 called the Central Long Island Chapter, was actually is my best friend now for the past 25 years, John S.J. Hart. So through these two people, I met just about 90% of the Koreans in Flushing, maybe 100% of different military and government officials in Korea. So I've been dedicated to the Korean War people, for the Korean people, because they suffered a lot. They really suffered a lot in Korea. It was very horrifying when you see women and children, elderly people that they can't do anything. They just got to keep going back and forth, back to Seoul, up the mountains, down the mountains. It was horrifying. And the country is split. It's still split today. Unfortunately, it became a political war, a stalemate war, and then a ceasefire. And it's still ceasefire now. It's 70 years. Actually not. It's 67 years since this armistice was signed. So technically, there still has a little war going on there, which
how do you feel, Sal? You've gone back. You and your colleagues have been celebrated and warmly welcomed. How do you feel about modern Korea and what you see when you visit Seoul today?
what I see is, progress. The Korean people, naturally the help of the United States to a point, and the Korean government, who merged with the Korean people, really built up Korea. And I've been back 8 times. First time was 94. It was shocking. There was still areas that were not pleasant, but there were a lot of areas that were built up. Now, the last time I was there, well, one of the times I was there, I was in the heart of Seoul, right near the Olympic Park. Okay, and it was 1:00 in the morning. And I says, I think I'm in New York. Every light was lit. Now they have a rule there that at nighttime, all the lights are on, even on the highways. They got lights in the cement because they want to show North Korea they're not afraid. And they got a beautiful life, better than theirs. And just to give you an example, every certain time of the year, Korea never had a big forest. They had something on the East Coast. So every year they have a plant a tree in Korea. I can't think of what they call it. It's like our Thanksgiving. And now they got a forest. So the cooperation of the people and the government subsidize the people to build their country. And they built it all themselves. And if you go there, it's kind of crowded. I think there's 50 million people there now, and they only got half a country. And New York is bigger than Korea, the whole Korea. So you can imagine how many people are there, and the progress that they do. And they have their own industries, they have their own products. Korea is a very, very, I think the 10th, 11th best economy country in the world. That's amazing. It still took them a century, but they did it. They did it on their own.
Amazing. It is indeed. Sal, could you say a few words about the Korean War Memorial? On July 27th, the National Memorial will mark 25 years. And how do you feel when you go to the National Memorial? And is there anything you wanted to say to mark that anniversary of the dedication of the U.S. Korean War Memorial?
Well, the Korea in Korea,
in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Yes.
My chapter, Central Long Island chapter, was involved in that memorial. My president at the time, Bob Morgan, he was a director in the national level. So his assignment was to see the progress of that memorial and it was done over in Binghamton, New York. He couldn't say anything. He just got progress to tell the National. Now, National was not in charge of it. It was another group called the Korean War Foundation. But he used to go there at whatever time he went and make some kind of little report. This is the progress. This is not the progress. Now, my chapter was one of the chapters that was the escort duty for that monument. When we brought it to Washington, it was kind of cold. And we escorted it from, we picked it up on the Jersey Turnpike, and we escorted it to Washington. We stood overnight and came home. But no matter who sees that monument reflects a military personnel. The design of the monument, if you look at it very closely, look at the eyes. When you look at the eyes, no matter how you follow the eyes, it's looking at you. And it's only a hole, but the way they sculptured around the eyes, and it's a gorgeous monument. It is a gorgeous monument. Unfortunately, now it's in the process of being redesigned, which I don't really agree on because they want to put names on a wall. But this monument for the past, since 1995, has been the talk of the country. Anybody that goes down there and they look at all the monuments are great, they're fabulous. But when you see these 19 soldiers marching, you think you're marching with them. And the wall is fabulous because they never knew how to do the supporting units. The guys that are walking are infantry. You got 2 Marines, 1 Navy personnel, okay? And you got 1 Air Force guy and the rest are Army. And 1 Navy guy, excuse me, like a corpsman. That's the whole, and there's also nationality type of things in there, Afro-Americans, Hispanic, and, things like that. You could see in the face, and it's it's one of the best monuments in Washington, and it's 5 acres. And it took a lot of money. We started out with $6 million, and it wound up to be $16 million. Now, my organization, we fundraised for almost a year, a little less, and we raised close to $75,000 towards the monument at that time. But it's fabulous. The monument, anybody that goes there always comes back and says it's fabulous. Now it's going to be under construction, so it may not look that good, but the construction is not started yet. Colonel Weber, who's the one in charge of it, is raising money.
Thanks, Sal. If I can ask you one last question before we go here, and that's your grandfather as well. So how do you feel we should be teaching the children now about the Korean War? What is the message that you would like to pass on to the next generation of Americans and Koreans about your time 70 years ago?
Well, quite a few years ago, back in the late 90s, we decided that nobody, and I'm telling you, nobody knew anything about the Korean War. It was always known as the Forgotten War and the Forgotten Victory. So at the beginning, when we all came home, we accepted it because we didn't care. We said, screw it. That's what they want. And we went about our business until we the original formed in 85. And then we formed, all the chapters started to form after that. So we got concerned. And it was always World War II and Vietnam. So we decided to have what we call Tell America program. We go to high schools, okay? Permission with the principal or the history teacher. We were very successful for the past 25 years. We've been doing this. We got so good at what we're not recruiters. See, some people think we're recruiters and we're not. We try to explain to the children why I have a lot of knowledge of why the war started, what the predicaments were, and our military career. Not too much combat. We try to stay away from that. So, and we try to educate them. Now, best part of this is we're educating Americans. Now there are Koreans, South Koreans, that don't know nothing about the history of Korea. And these are people that the grandmothers never told the daughters or sons, and they never told their sons. So we started a program going to churches, Korean churches, Korean youth centers, anything that had an organization that do anything with children. There's one called the IYF. It's called the International Youth Fellowship. I did a segment there with over 500 kids, but it was a mixed, a United Nations type of children. So we try to do this. Now we're getting older, so it's a little more difficult for us to get out. So, like MacArthur said, the Korean War vets are fading away. So, but that's what we try to do. Now, I educated my family, which I didn't do when I was younger. But as my grandkids got involved, they were interested. So the next step was I started another program to go to libraries, because libraries have a lot of people, grown-ups that would go. Because if you tell a student, a high school student, whatever you tell them about the Korean War, they go home to the mother or father, they say, Dad, what happened to the Korean War? And the mother, father says, I don't know. So we try to do libraries where they have parents go to educate parents. Now there's a group which I belong to, it's called the Korean War Veterans Legacy Grandchildren Teachers. His name is Johan Han. He started this about 11 years ago, and I'm his first vice. So what he did, first he got the grandchildren involved, okay, which is fine, but the grandchildren get older. They get married, so you can forget them. So he says, what are we going to do next? So he says, let's get teachers involved. Right now he has 100 teachers in his organization all over the United States, all different. And he has reunions and they share their knowledge together so they can bring it back to their children. Now, started last year, he went to Europe and is getting teachers in Europe to do the same thing, teach the government and why the Korean War and so forth and so on. But he can't tell our stories. What he did do was, on our legacy, we're on the computer now. He interviewed over maybe 2,000 Korean War vets, and their stories are on the computer. You just have to go to Korean War Legacy dot something, and you can pick up any veteran you want.
Thank you, Sal. And thank you for sharing your stories today. And thank you for your efforts during the war and, of course, the many efforts since the war. The Korea Society is very grateful to have you as a close friend, as well as your guides, and we're always happy to see you, and we'll see you again soon. I'd like to thank Sal and thank his daughter Karen again, and as well thank Jonathan Corrado, our Director of Policy at the Korea Society, who put together the video montage that you saw before, as well as Peter Stemke, our Director of Technology. Also the hardworking staff of the Korea Society. And I'd encourage all of you to join the Korea Society, which works hard to educate and was founded by General James A. Van Fleet to both show the history and culture of Korea and really to honor veterans as well, the two founding principles that Big Jim Van Fleet put forward. And you can do that at koreasociety.org and access all of our policy, arts and culture, and education programs. Gotcha. Sal, thank you very much. We're honored to have had you, and we thank you for your service.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, please, Sal.
the alliance between the United States and Korea, the Republic of Korea, is very, very strong and very, very powerful. And every year it gets stronger and stronger, especially with the Korean War veterans. The Korean War vets and the Korean people, Korean government, Korean organizations are very, very strong, and the Korean society. I want to give special thanks to everyone in the Korean society. You could probably have a list a mile long, and Steve, Jonathan, Peter, Tom, your ambassador, every year for the past 10 years, I've been honoring the Korean War vets at their gala in September. So I thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart, Steve, that you allowed me to come to tell the stories of the Korean War. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sal, and the honor is very much ours. On that note, we'd like to thank Sal and thank you all for joining us today. And please see koreasociety.org for a dedicated page of Korean War at 70. Sal, thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks a lot. Stay well.